Hey, Central students and students' families and volunteers. I wanted to take a bit this morning just to talk about kind of some ways that I'm feeling, and I think maybe you're all feeling right now as we're not physically in this space, right? So I'm in the youth room. You can see the 9 square court behind me, somewhere over here. And honestly, when I walked in to do this video, I was filled with sadness. And that we're not on it. That there's not this big line of you all, kind of going out into the lounge area, waiting to play and get in, and fighting for that king spot. I'm also lamenting just in general for this time at your loss of what makes being in middle school and high school oftentimes so special. Being with your friends, playing on sports teams, doing plays, musicals, being in band, just whatever that stuff is that you're missing out on because you're either home or you're at school or you're still learning virtually in some way, or there's some hybrid model, just all this mess that is this time. I am sad for you. I am lamenting for you. And that's what I want to talk about today, that word lament. It's not a word I think we use really often, and I think sometimes we might even be scared of it. So to define it, the dictionary definition of it is that it's a passionate expression of grief or sorrow. Another way to describe it would be that it's an acknowledgement that we are experiencing the not rightness of this world, and that's causing us anxiety or distress or sadness that we express in that way. When we lament, or when we come to this word lament, I think in our culture, and especially in church in general, right? Not just Central, but church in general in America, I think we have two common issues with lament that cause us to either not do it at all or to do it incorrectly. And the first is this: is that we avoid it, and there's two ways that we avoid it. We either think that it's unnecessary or wrong, so that it shows a lack of faith or joy, or we try to be positive and not thinking that our circumstances are that bad. So we do those things so that we can avoid it, or we try to lessen its necessity and effects by shielding ourselves from painful situations. We might amass lots of stuff or things, or even in the wake of starting to feel pain, go buy a bunch of stuff. There's all kinds of ways that we do this. We get into relationships, all kinds of things, but they help us to try and avoid the fact that what we're dealing with is painful. So we try to avoid it. The other thing is that if we do lament, sometimes we stay stuck in it. We don't let ourselves let go of it. We don't move on and understand what God might be doing with that. In John chapter 11, Jesus addresses each of these approaches and offers us a better way. And I want to use that a little bit to kind of help us see. So the story in John 11, I'm not going to read it, but I just want to share it with you. This is, of course, the story about how Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. And to summarize this, Jesus had this friend. His name was Lazarus. And Lazarus had two sisters, Mary and Martha, and they lived in this town called Bethany. And we find out that Lazarus is really sick. He's actually on the verge of dying. And so Mary and Martha send for Jesus to come because they know that Jesus is capable of healing him, and they want him to come and heal their brother so that he would live. He's probably pretty young, maybe 20s or 30s, so not very old. Certainly shouldn't be at the end of his life, anything like that. And so they call for Jesus to come and heal him. But Jesus delays his coming and arrives after Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. Now, what ends up happening in this story is, of course, Jesus talks with Mary, talks with Martha, looks at everybody who is crying, feels sad for them. We'll get into that in just a second. And then he walks in and he raises Lazarus from the dead. He actually calls him back to life. But what I want to focus on in this chapter, in this story, is actually this one verse, verse 35. It's the shortest verse in the entire Bible. And it says this. It says, Jesus wept. And what Jesus is signaling to us as he weeps in the face of his friend's death is that it's okay to lament. We don't have to avoid it. It's not something we should avoid. It's something that we should embrace. It's okay to lament. It's okay to share passionate expressions of grief or sorrow. It's okay to acknowledge that we are experiencing the not rightness of the world. Jesus models this for us as he weeps for his friend's death, and not just for his friend's death, but for everyone else who's there. right? Jesus is joining in with the others that are lamenting there. There's this huge group of people playing instruments and wailing and singing and just crying out for this young man who's died. And Jesus stops in the midst of this, seeing them, and he weeps. He expresses his grief in a very loud way. And what this does is it shows that he cares for us and loves us. He doesn't condemn the crowd for being faithless or being sad even. He doesn't leave this family and community to their own pain. He doesn't tell them that their situation is not that bad, that there are situations that are worse. He actually experiences pain with and for them. These were his friends, and their pain caused him great distress. These people were not just an ends to his means of proving that he was God. He was about to raise Lazarus from the dead and say, like, look, I'm this powerful. Look at how powerful I am. But he wasn't using these people for that purpose, just for that. He cared deeply about them and wanted them to know that the reason he's raising Lazarus from the dead is because he loves and cares for them. He is also lamenting at the community's lack of understanding of who he really is. They missed that Jesus was actually God. He signaled it to them multiple times at this point, but they've still missed it. And he's lamenting that they don't understand what he's actually capable of because of who he is. So this lamenting that we do, this lamenting that Jesus does, what he's calling us to is acknowledging that we are experiencing the not rightness of the world. And this is one of the primary ways that we show the world God's love for it. As you deal with the sadness of your years and missed dances and missed youth group and missed sporting events and all of these things, it's okay to be sad and lament over those things. And when we do that, we are acknowledging the not rightness of the world, and it actually shows the world that God loves it. We join with Jesus in this. Not lamenting communicates the opposite. So we're called to lament at our losses the way that Jesus laments at the loss of his friends. That's what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to feel sad. We're not supposed to avoid it. We're not supposed to shield ourselves from it. And we're not supposed to downplay it. We're supposed to feel it. But there's also furthering in how we lament. There's a proper way to do it. And when we lament properly, when we do this the way that Jesus does, a few things happen. One is we're actually able to be honest about our circumstances, right? We can look at it and say, this is a sad thing that we've missed all these things. Not only are we able to be honest about that, but we're able to see any idols that we might have or wrong pictures of God that we might have, things that we have put in place to kind of shield us from these difficult situations. God's taking those things away so that we can get to him truly. And once we get to him, we're able to rest in true hope for the future. Not false hope in idols or false hope in false pictures of who God really is, but true hopes for the future. Because we're able to acknowledge that we are not God and that we can't create a place to completely insulate ourselves from pain. And these pieces of truth allow us to finally and truly find rest in God, which is often what he's after and what he uses our difficult circumstances for, what he's using this time for. God did not cause this stuff to happen to us, but he allowed it to happen to us. And as he's allowing it to happen to us, it's that he's using it so that we can find rest in him, so that we stop trying to find rest in other things and we find rest in him. And ultimately, that's what we're after too. When we're looking for rest in these other things, we're looking for rest that can only be found in God. And it's this hope that allows us to not stay stuck in our lamenting, right? So I said that's the two things that we wrestle with, either not lamenting, which Jesus says is okay, but then also not staying stuck in it. And it's this hope that God's actually in charge, that he's using this for us to find rest in him, that allows us to not stay stuck. All of the New Testament writers pick up on this same theme. Paul in Romans 8:28 tells us that our trials are how God brings about his good in us. In Hebrews 12:11, we're told that God uses our difficulty as a way to discipline us, not punish us, but make us better disciples so that we can produce a harvest of righteousness. We can bring his goodness into the world and find contentment in that because we have gone through difficult things and lamented properly in them. James 1:2 tells us to consider it pure joy when we face these trials, because out of them we're made steadfast, right? So we're made like rocks, able to stand up to anything that comes in our way. because we've faced these trials. We consider it pure joy because this steadfastness makes us perfect and complete in Him. What James is essentially saying is that this trial will end and there will be more in the future. But God is using this trial to strengthen you for the next and the next and the next. You all are moving on in life. If you're in middle school, you're going to go to high school, and the things that you're going to face in high school are harder than the things that you faced in middle school. And if you're in high school, you're going to go on to college, and the things that you face in college are going to be harder than the things you faced in high school. And then you're going to become adults, and you're going to get married, maybe, and you're going to have kids, maybe, or you won't. And all of those things are going to be trials. And God uses the ones before that to strengthen you and make you steadfast so that you're ready to face them and continually find true hope in the midst of that, right? Still working through that, understanding your circumstances, understanding that you're not God, looking at any idols that might be in the way and finding true hope for the future. That's what James is talking about happening. And while that may sound daunting, James is actually encouraging us to take joy in it because it's in these trials that we meet God and find what we're really searching for. So Matt and Ari and I met, a month ago, I think, kind of talking about some core values in our youth ministry that we wanted, some things that we wanted to be about. And as we talked, one of the themes that came up over and over and over again was this idea of joy. And so next year we're going to focus on joy. And Matt and I are working on kind of some teaching, and a lot of the stuff that we end up doing whenever we're able to get together or even online or whatever is going to all be centered around joy, finding God's joy in us, understanding how to take joy and delight in ourselves and how to find joy and delight in other people around us. And we're going to be talking about that. And so we were talking about that even before we came to this point. And so when I found out that we couldn't be in this space anymore, and I knew that I was upset about that and other people were upset about that, but it was the thing that we were going to have to do to be safe and to follow the directives of our governing authorities and to be in compliance with them. I had two options. I could be upset about it, or I could do just like what James says, and I could take joy. And so I chuckled at that when that happened, that like, oh, okay, God, you're giving us an opportunity to actually model what this looks like, to not just talk about having joy, but to have an opportunity to show what it looks like to be joyful in the midst of difficult circumstances. Even coming into this job, before I took it, about 2 weeks before, or even before that, I had been thinking about all the things that I wanted to do with you all the ideas that I had, stuff that I wanted to replicate from my own time in youth ministry that I thought would be good for this, new ideas, all sorts of stuff. And then about 2 weeks before it all became official, I was out for a run, and I remembered, oh yeah, there's COVID. So we can't do any of that, at least not immediately. And so I started feeling anxious about what we were going to do, and if you and I were going to gel together, and how I was going to get to know you well and spend time with you if we were going to have all of this social distancing stuff going on. And at the time, we didn't even have large group, right? And I was worried that if I was going to live up to the expectation of my hire, if people were going to be like, well, this guy's not that great. And so I'm feeling all of these things. And again, learning that large group had kind of provided a little bit of insulation against that. And then all of a sudden we lost large group. And again, I chuckled. Why? Because I was just reminded of James 1:2 again, that I can consider it pure joy to face this trial, because I know that God is using this in my own life, in the lives of our ministry here, this thing that we're all involved in, and in your lives, to show you and me and all of us together His love for us. That it's not dependent upon this space or this room or actually physically being together, but it's on Him. And so we can take joy in that. And that's what I want to challenge you with. He's helping me to focus on Him and to have a proper hope for the future. And He's challenging you with the same thing. So Matt and Ari and I and our volunteers, we're working on some things to bring that joy to life over the next few weeks between now and Christmas. Hopefully we'll be back in the building after that. Depends on kind of what the county says. We're going to follow those guidelines. But I don't know if we'll be back after Christmas. We might still be out of this building for another month or two, waiting on vaccines and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully we'll be back here sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, what I want to challenge you with in finding this joy and understanding this time is to stay connected. One of the best ways that God uses to bring this about, to teach us this thing, to encourage us, is to stay connected, even if it has to be digital. So we're working on some social media things, some things to kind of add some value to your life. Hopefully there's no pressure to stay involved. And we're trying to make them not boring and not just to do things that you have to do, but stuff hopefully that can be a little bit of a distraction or an encouragement or a challenge in your day. You've probably seen some of them already this week. We'll have more coming out. We're not trying to inundate you with that stuff, but there will be some things there. And we're also working on some physical things that we can use to connect with you. Note cards, phone calls, things like that. For now, what you can do is there's a contact card that Ari and I have both sent out to you all. Please fill it out if you haven't. That's just helping us find the best way to connect with and reach you. I promise we're not going to spam you. We're not going to send you a bunch of stuff. We just want to be able to get information to you and help stay connected, and that helps us know the best way to do that. And we also might send you a candy bar, so you got to let us know what your favorite candy is. None of these things is amazing, and they will never replace the awesomeness of actually being in our large group together. God made us physical beings to be together, and not being together is cause for lament. And these things, while they approximate that, while they kind of feel a little bit like that, they're still not the same as being in this room, playing 9 Square together, laughing together, ragging on each other together, eating candy together, whatever it is, right? So as soon as we can get back in here, we will. But for now, we're actually pretty excited to see what God is going to do with our community in this time, in the midst of this trial and in this difficulty, as we do what we can with what we have. I love you all. Matt and Ari love you all as well. And we can't wait to play 9 Square with you again soon.